Synaxis, but one of the clergymen said, since we're all together, the clergy from afar, maybe you can tell us something from your stories of the Holy Mountain of your monastery. So I accepted, although I'm quite tired. I said, I had an occasion to speak with someone of late, actually this last week. And the person was asking about monasticism. He stayed a couple of weeks in a monastic house of ours to try it out, to see what it's like. And I said to him, I never give pep talks to anyone and try to convince him to become a monastic. And I don't go out, and I've been out a lot to parishes, especially center, and try to find any enthused candidates. Because I don't want to take responsibility. Someone will hear and think and join, and then after a while will say, well, I didn't really figure it out, and give me all these pep talks, and so I would be held responsible. But I said, if I'm asked, then I will express myself. And I told them, I've never regretted that I became a monastic. I rejoice. The older I become, the more I rejoice that I became a monastic. And I ask people sometimes, if you could live your life again, and we have only one life, but if one could live another life again, would you like to be where you are and to do what you are doing? Most of the times I hear no. I'd like to do something else. I'd like to be somewhere else. Well, if you ask me, I would like to be a monk again. I wouldn't want to be anything else or be anywhere else in the monastic life. And that says it all, just there. I had that brother. We had a little sister. She was the firstborn. She died 3.5 years old. So it was my brother who was older than me, 18 months, and myself. And I was very sickly. In my childhood, I had a semi-hemophilic condition where the blood wouldn't coagulate, and just a nosebleed, I could bleed to death. And so I couldn't play like the other children. My brother was an avid baseball player, and he liked sports. I just couldn't. I wasn't allowed. I had my first blood transfusion, 4.5 years old. It was traumatic. But I almost died. If I had to have a tooth extracted, I had a tooth extracted when I was in my early teens. I almost died over that. Usually, when you had your tonsils out, you would go to the office, and it would be an outpatient situation, the doctor's office. I had to go to the hospital. I stayed there 2 days. I came out, and then the blood clot left while I was asleep. I was swallowing blood. My mother saw that I was swallowing something, woke me up. As soon as I got up, I fell. I swallowed so much blood from the bleeding. At 2 o'clock in the morning, my father took me to the hospital. It just, so I had to stay in. And since I couldn't be involved with sports, I couldn't be allowed in this, and couldn't be involved in that, I grew up in a very Greek ghetto. My mother didn't learn English, so that we would learn Greek, the two boys. She figured that if she learned English, we would come home from school, speak to her in English, and we would never speak Greek. So we couldn't communicate with our mother unless we communicate in Greek. So I learned the language quite well. I was 10 years old when the Second World War finished. I was born in 1935. 1945, the war ended. By the age of 10, I was able to write Greek well and to speak it fluently. So I became Rafeas for the grandmothers who were illiterate. And my mother would send me around. And we always went by foot, although it might be miles within the east side of Detroit. That's the way it was in their villages. They had no cars, they had no buses, etc. And if it was within walking distance would be an hour and a half. That was considered walking distance. And so I would visit, and I would write them the letters, since the letters could go back and forth. During the occupation, there was no communication. The German occupation, the Second World War. And that's how I picked up also dialects, local dialects. Because every area of Greece had its own usage of expressions. And sometimes I would tell one grandmother, this is in Greek. She says, it's Greek. I said, well, we don't speak like that. She says, you write what I tell you, and they know, and they will understand. They didn't call the months by the names that we'd say. So she would say, on the certain day of Galisti. Yeah. What's Galisti? Well, Galistis. That's how she used. The polisher, Galistis. That's July. Why? Because most fruit gets a sheen. It ripens in July. So you had the Theristi, you had Trigiti, the harvesting month, the grape month, Trigitis, Trigitis, a gathering of the grapes. And each, so I picked up a lot of, and of course my mother came from a mountainous part of southern Greece, and so her sister came just before her younger sister, the war started. She couldn't go back, so she was with us all the 4 years, and they would speak their own way, and I picked that up being young. And when I went to Greece, my mother had many sisters, 5 girls. They were in the family, 1 boy. I had a lot of first cousins. And they would tell their mothers, which was my mother's sisters, he doesn't speak like us. No, the mothers would say, that's the way we speak in the village. So he speaks Greek, but it wasn't Katharevos, they were Athenians, and they spoke High Greek. And I didn't speak this High Greek. So one time I was in Kalamata, and I said an expression, and the Mother Superior, which was my mother's older sister, she was Mother Superior Philothea, she laughed. She says, my dear, he says, you know that expression? Of course, you know that expression, as we use it. Kurafexala. Something's kurafexala. It's a local dialect, which means something is nonsense. That's nonsense. So she sent one sister out. They had a large area where the communists got, and brought this little shriveled thing. That was kurafexala. It's a wild fruit. And it's dark brown, shriveled. It looks like a nonsense, like something that's kurafexala. I think that's the name.
It's hollow.
Yeah, it's hollow. And so they picked it up from the fruit, the wild fruit kurafexala. So because I had to be in that good play, I like to read, and I would read as much as I could, lives of saints, etc. The truth about the matter is that when I was a child, there wasn't that much in English. But my mother had some lives of the saints by Saliveros, those little pamphlets that were printed from the 20s and 30s in Greece. And then after the war, when I was 10 years old, they sent our relatives, little things. And so I could read and Greek, but that neighborhood I grew up was Roman Catholic mostly, working people. And so I would read Roman Catholic literature for children. And I knew all the new saints of the Roman Catholic Church were for teenagers. I picked up so much in my formative years that Roman Catholics today don't know, most of them. After Vatican II, the generation they grew up, they don't know anything. And Dominic Savi, who's Dominic Savi? They look at me, And Maria Goretti, who's Maria Goretti? Dominic Savi was a teenager when he died, and he was the spiritual son of Don Bosco, which started the whole order. And they weren't Orthodox saints, but that's the only thing I could get my hands on to be able to. I must say, I was profited, because there were pious stories and pious events, etc. And but when I was able to get my hands on Orthodox, and right after the war, they started, and then in the early 50s, Kibotos started coming out, and little things that contemplate Rhythmicos Kipos, and we had a Greek town, and they had Yakakos, remember? Mm-hmm. He had a printing press, a Greek newspaper. Yeah. We had 2 Greek newspapers, local. And so he had a bookstore, and he would sell these little publications. And I just loved them. And I could read them, of course, since my Greek was good. And I really was impressed. So from a child, my heroes were the saints. And then at the age of 5, I met Pagathangelos from St. Spiridon's Church, who was old calendar. And he was an amazing man from Anatolia. He was from Andabar, of Digde, the parts of Cappadocia. And he could liturgize in Greek, but he couldn't give sermon in Greek. He couldn't speak Greek. They were Turkish-speaking Christians, Anatolians, what they call Karamanides. So they had books with Greek alphabet, but Turkish dialect. The lives of the saints, the services. He could chant, he could say the gospel in Greek, could read Greek, but he could not speak it. But he was a great influence as a child. I was awed by him. He had full beard. I have a picture of him. And then I was 11 years old. Father Auxentius came, the later Archbishop Auxentius, because Father Gathang was so old. He, with difficulty, served the liturgy. And as soon as the war ended, they wrote Archbishop Matthew and asked for a priesthood, and he sent his best first duhovnik, prematiko, which was Auxentius. And he was there till I was 14 years old, 15. So from 11 years old till I was my teens, I had Father Auxentius. He was a very good example. And some nuns came from Karatea, Mother Marina, and one other, and I was very impressed by them. They were very pious, and they had vigils, and they had the prayer robes, etc. So I really took, I started reading the Catechism, but I didn't know what I was reading. Until I found a Faith Press, a Catechism which had the Greek and the English, those little, printed in England, the Faith Press. I didn't know what most of the, it was beautiful, and to chant Tiper Marco, but what did it all say? I was very pleasantly surprised to find out what it says. Here kratir. That's where crater comes from. So kratir is a bowl, a mixing bowl for wine. Here olkas, what's olkas? It's a word not used any longer in modern Greek. It's a barge when you want to cross over a water way. And so I was enthused when I found out what I was saying. So this Hajiya that I met when I was about 5, 6 years old, she would always tell me about the saints. But she had to say it in Turkish because she didn't speak Greek either. And her daughter Sophia, who knew Greek, would translate. when Sophia was busy doing housework or wasn't around, Yaya would pantomime the lives. And she first told me about St. John the Russian when I was about 6 years old. And she would say how he stood in prayer, they left their hands Eastern way, the Anatolian Greeks, and how he had a stone for a pillow, and he slept on the ground in the stable. And so she would, and then I perked up a little Turkish. She would say, either you're going to learn Turkish or I'm going to learn Greek. She didn't really learn Greek, and I didn't really learn Turkish, but I learned household words. Sit down, get up, bread, water, prayers in Turkish, etc. She was a very big influence. Then they had a chanter at the Church of St. Barbastelios, Uncle Stelianos, and he chanted very compunctually. He had a big mustache, old-timer. And he loved the Mother of God very much, and he had many books from the Holy Mountain. He had this one book of all the wonder-working icons of the Holy Mountain. And then I would hear pilgrim stories from Haji Yaya and other who were pilgrims had gone to Jerusalem. So my first love was St. Savas, the monastery. And I was always looking forward to grow up and to leave and to go to St. Savas monastery in the Judean desert, become a monastic. And I was very enthused with the life of St. Onufrius, the naked ones, and St. Peter, but especially Onufrius. And Yaya used to tell me, then I was so young, I didn't remember the names sometimes. And I remember when I was a novice at the monastery of St. Panteleimon, I was already a monastic, in the month of June, is the feast of St. Paisius the Great. And I recognized when they were reading the life in the Trapeza, St. Panteleimon was a Russian monastery. One day they read in Greek, the next day they read in Russian. The next day they read in Greek and Trapeza, the next day in Russian. They had that. And the services in the big church in Panteleimon were in both languages. If the Kakragari were in Greek, the Aposticha were in Slavonic. And the Orthodox, again, was divided. And they said the Gospels in 2 languages. They said the Creed in 2 languages. They said Our Father in 2 languages. That's how we have also now ourselves 2 and 3 languages. So I remembered that, that was St. Paisius she was telling me, an incident from his life. So I was so young, but I remembered these things. So my heroes were the Desert Fathers especially, and I dreamed. Well, my parents were not very happy that I had dreams of becoming a monastic. And immigrant parents, they wanted both boys to be educated, become teachers, lawyers, doctors, something. My brother became a doctor, and they thought it would be good to be a teacher or a lawyer or something, And I didn't want them. So I began to correspond with one father in the Holy Mountain through this Barbastelios, the chanter, Uncle Stelianos. I began correspondence with my father, Evgenios Radidis from Kapsokalibiaski to the Holy Mountain. He was a iconographer. And he would send icons, and they were sold by this Barbastelios to help him right after the war. And he wrote beautiful letters. I kept all the letters. Then after I met Father Oxentius and the sisters from Karatea, I began corresponding with the sisters in Karatea. And there was one Nancy Klitiki was her name. And she was a relative of Matthew, who was the founder of the convent. And in the war, she was a teacher. So she knew Greek very well, beautiful Greek, and very nice handwriting. This is Klitiki Monarchy of Karatea. And actually, she's the one who began cleaning up and putting together the great collection of Lives of the Saints, Synaxis in Greek, from the older editions. And back then, of course, it was all by hand. There was no computers in the 40s. But there were typewriters, but they didn't have a typewriter. It was all by hand. This is volumes, right? And before Matthew died, he died in 1950. 2-3 of the months had come out. They started with September. But there was a division among them after when the will was opened, and then it was Victor Mateos who took over. So instead of the convent printing the Synaxis, he printed this, and then he did many editions of many church books, etc. Anyhow, so I had all that correspondence, and I was keeping it in a box from the Holy Mountain, from this Father Eugenius and this Mother Sigritiki. Alas, my parents destroyed the collection, so I don't have one letter of that collection. They burned it all. And they thought that if I didn't have it and could read it, etc., that I would forget about monasticism, etc. And I finished high school quite young. I was bright, my brother was bright, and we went to summer school too. Actually, I finished high school 15 years old. But my birthday is 21st of June, so in a couple of weeks I became 16. But technically speaking, I was 15 when I finished. And so they said, no, you can't leave to go to any monastery and become a monastic. And back then it was 21 years old, you were legal age. Not 18, which is now. So they compelled me to go to university. So I went to university out of obedience, and I didn't like it, but I went. After 2 years, they asked me, and I said, no, I still want to become monastic. We're spending our money to educate you, and you still want to be a monastic. Let's compromise. What's the compromise? Go to the seminary, Holy Cross. And that way you can become a clergyman. They thought married clergyman, of course, etc. And forget about monastic. I didn't care for the university, to tell you the truth. So I thought, well, why not? So at 18 years old, I came to the seminary. My Greek was so good, I'd gone 2 years university. They gave me an examination in Greek. And they were surprised that I knew Greek so well, so they gave me credit for the 2 years, and I was put in the third year. And my classmates didn't like that I came and went straight to the third year. And Father Nikitas was in that class, Palacios. He was a third year student at that time. So when I saw that they frowned, and they took it badly that I just came in, and my Greek was better even than theirs already. They were the third year. That I asked to come down to the second year class. And then I became a hero for the second year class, and I came down for the third year. That class was at the cathedral.
Zanettos?
Oh, at the cathedral in New York.
Oh.
We hit on the photo of Lydia Haralabos, Harry Stephanopoulos. And we were very good friends. And also Papa Dimitriou. He was, his family, his father was a priest, and they just come over. His brother also became a priest. And so we were very close with Papa Dimitriou, etc. But within a month, I understood that there was no real spiritual life. And I said, no, I'm not going to stay and become a priest. I'm going to become a monastic. So I told my parents. They were very grieved. So they said, well, all right, then you have to go back to school. So it was 1 year that was lost, but I was so young anyhow. And so I went and served Bishop Ezekiel Chukalas, who was at St. Andrew's House in Jamaica Plain. And at that time, he was transferred to Chicago. So I stayed behind to pack his whole library. He had an extensive library, his vestments, to send them all. And then by train, I went also. And so I lost 1 year in university. Then 19 years old, I was back at the university. I spent another 2 years. I finished. But I finished at 20 years old, but became 21 within a few weeks. And Detroit was in recession. I had to work to get my fare. My parents weren't going to pay for me to go across to become a monk. And there was no work in Detroit. So I went 80 miles north to Port Huron and worked in a Roman Catholic hospital as a kitchen boy. And I was very modest. I was very careful, very good worker. And they were very impressed, the sisters. The sisters still ran hospitals. Back then, now they're run by secular nurses, etc. And they had their habits and everything. And they had me work in the kitchen as a kitchen boy. But then they wanted a wall wash. I did it so nicely that I washed the whole cafeteria, etc. They were very impressed that I was careful in my work. And at the end of the summer, they would have a fund. If they were tipped, the sisters, they would put all their tips in this fund, common fund. And each year, one of the sisters would choose her favorite charity. So they all chose that year to give their favorite charity to me. Since they learned I was going to become a monastic, they were very impressed by that. And I didn't take it. I was very proud, very Greek. And I said, oh, no, I can't take it. They said, why? They've already given it to you. I said, no, I earned my fare and I have a little extra. I'm not taking it. I said, you give it to charity. I says, they were a little Greek, but they were impressed that I think it was some hundreds of dollars. Back then, that was like a few $1,000, right? This is the 50s, 1956. So at the end of the summer of 56, I went by boat. It was the end of October that I left from New York by boat. That was the season where after they stopped for winter, there was big storms. And we had a big storm at the sea, and we were 2 days late to enter the Mediterranean because of the storm. I'd never been on the sea, so I thought it was always like that, and I didn't get frightened, and I didn't get seasick. Most of the Italians and Greeks that were on the ship, they got seasick. And then it became so bad that they prohibited us to go out on the deck, not to be swept over into the sea. And even inside, in the quarters, they put a rope to hold on to the rope. At the trapeza, they would have a frame around the table, so when the ship did, all the dishes and the glasses wouldn't go off, they would stop, One time, I was taken with my chair, and if there wasn't there a wall, I would have been swept out to the sea, etc. Anyhow, I caught a cold because it was so windy and cold. I got to Greece. I was wearing black from the seminary, and so I continued wearing black suits and ties after. My parents didn't like that, but they couldn't do anything about that. And so I arrived finally in Greece. My father was educated, his Greek was good, that is, and he came quite young, so he finished high school in this country, so he knew his English well too. And he wrote to this Father Evgenius at the Holy Mountain and told them that how grieved he was that I was wanted to be a monk, and instructed him to write to me and tell me not to come be a monk. As I said, my first love was the Holy Land. I wanted to go to Marsala. By my second year of university, my brother became sick, who had gone a year before to university, and he was in pre-med, and he had to have a general examination at the beginning of the school year, and they found a big spot in one of his lungs, and was diagnosed tuberculosis. Of course, it was a contagious disease, so he had to go to this Hemmer Kiffer Hospital for contagious disease. Do you remember it? Hemmer Kiffer. And he wasn't able to come out of his bed, come down. And he was very athletic, as I said, very active. All of a sudden, there he was. It was a visitation from God, because I would take him literature, he would read it. He read the Conversation of St. Seraphim of Sarov. He was very impressed by that, with Nikolai Molotilov. And I had a little print of the Kiko's Mother of God, and I put that over his bed with Scotch tape. I have it in my room now in the frame. It's a print from the 1800s. It's not in color, but it's a very pious print of the Kiko's Mother of God. So from a child, I had great love for the Kiko's Mother of God. And because he was not of age also, my father had to sign for the operation to take place. The family was devastated because if they removed one of his lungs, he was not going to be able to finish pre-med and become a doctor, because you had to study long hours and it was very stressful. And because my sister had died before, of course my mother. Now, on my father's side, we had his patron saint, Saint Haralabos, because he was the patron of Filatra, the city of my father. Because my father was George, we always had St. George as a patron. And his feast days, we always had Orthodoxia, we made at the home, etc. My mother's side, they had a chapel on their property in Mani, Laconia, of St. Panteleimon, which was built on a big boulder, on top of a boulder. And the boulder was hollow. And below it, you could enter, and there was a spring, a Giasma, holy spring. And they called it Abovoda. And I never Bishop Demetrius told me when he was novice Demetrius, Abo voda, voda, abo, voda, see? So something water. And the Slavs had come down in the 12th century into Peloponnesus, all of Peloponnesus. And they had a dynasty, they built the Church of St. Nicholas at Plaza Cabanari, they call the area, with frescoes from the 12th century. So he was, of course, a doctor, healer. So I made a vow that if my brother was healed and he would continue his medical studies, I would not go to Marsa, I would go to Panteleimon monastery and the Holy Mount. So that's how I changed course, and why I went to Panteleimon, which was not even a Greek monastery, it was a Russian monastery. I knew nothing about the Russian people. There were a lot of churches in Detroit, all the jurisdictions, and all the ethnic groups, and actually there was the center of the Romanians, and their Vatra was outside of Detroit. Their Episcopal residence and center, not New York. Everyone else was in New York, but the Romanians were in Detroit. Father Opranu, and also St. George Cathedral. And of course the Ukrainians, Uniats, and all the other jurisdictions of the Ukrainians, etc., Russians. So in my middle teens, later teens, I would go to all the churches. And so I knew, but I didn't know the differences. I didn't know why the Russians were divided. They were all old style. I couldn't understand, since they were all old style, why they had different jurisdictions, the Church Abroad. And they had all three jurisdictions, Church Abroad, Metropolitan, and Moscow Patriarchate in Detroit. St. Michael's was Moscow Patriarchate on the west side. I very early understood the profit of frequent Holy Communion. But there was a problem. The clergy frowned on frequent communion. So in order to be able to take every Sunday Holy Communion, I had to go to a different church. And there were so many churches that it was a possibility. And I remember once I went to Evangelismos, for some reason, Patrick Ivanopoulos,
Pastor Constantine.
Yeah. He wasn't the priest, but he was. So I took communion. Then I made the mistake next Sunday, I went again. I went to the cup. I was a layperson. He says, "Did you take communion last week?" I said, "What do you think? This is soup?" He says, "Right there at the cup." Then the soup I lay. Out, he says. He wouldn't give me communion. Mm-hmm. And he was from the Holy Mountain. He was from the monastery of Sonofondos. And, you have to take communion after 40 days or something like that and all that. So I got so embarrassed, that from then on I just went to different churches. But from then I understood the strength and the profit of frequent Holy Communion. Now having read even the pamphlet by St. Macarius and St. Nicodemus on continuous Holy Communion, Synechus dias metalipsios. Later I found that and about the Colibadas movement, etc. I knew nothing about that. So as I said, I left, I went. All my relatives were there at the Imperials. When I came off the boat, they started crying, they hugged me. They said, "Why are you wearing black?" I said, "Why? Don't you like it?" "No," he says. "Our sister hasn't died." That's my mother. It's my mother's sisters. And we wear black so when someone dies in the family. I said, "No, I like black." "But you're a young man." I was 21 years old. "You should wear, a light suit and a yellow tie, a red tie or something. Since you're young, to be happy." I says, "That's going to make me happy," I says, "by wearing bright colored ties and shirts, and come on," I says. So anyhow, I stayed with the oldest sister, who was a widow, Georgia, and she had one boy, Panos. He died, heart attack, young, life. Anyhow, so she took care of me and made venduzas, since I had a very bad cold. And they were very worried that the boat was late coming because of the big storm in the Atlantic. And so she made a vow to St. Nicholas that if I came safely, there was a country chapel in the gardens of the botanical school, which was the area where my relatives lived, Botanico. The church was St. Marcella, Borisou, the name of the street. And that's Borissos from Chios. That's why the church is St. Marcella. And so she took me after I became well from my cold and the venduzas to light the lamps of the chapel of St. Nicholas, which was deep into this botanical gardens, etc., and was below the surface of it was quite below, steps below, so that the dome of the church actually came to a little above the ground level. The church was from before the fall of Constantinople, so it was an ancient little shrine. And everyone knew it, and they would go light the lamps on Saturday night and feast days. So I was impressed, by the piety. But the marble floor, there were, stones, marble slabs. Oil had fallen, beeswax. It wasn't upkept so, because it was just a country chapel. And that's the chapel when, after I became a monk, time passed. I went on my own when I came back to Athens as a monastic a year and a half after, And I was all cleaned and ribbons on the icons, especially St. Nicholas, And I says, he must have worked some miracle, and someone came and tidied up the chapel. And so I was by myself, there was no one there. And I opened, and then Megalologion, I found the Paraklesis to our Savior. The Greeks don't have the Akathis to our Savior, but they have a Paraklesis to our Savior. Isuglikita te Christe. Despota Christe eleison. So I chanted it. And I was conscious while I was chanting that someone entered the chapel, but I didn't turn around to look. And as soon as I finished, I heard a voice, Evie, Evie, bravo, bravo. What beautiful words. I looked around, it was a grandmother, ancient. And she had a little she tied her whole head around, It wasn't falling, cheperi. It was tied. I guess she was bald, even, And what's your name, Grandma? Caterina. Catherine. She was from Egina. And I said, oh, if you like it, I'll show you where it is, then you can find it. Daskala, she's the teacher. They call it the clergy teacher. I was not really, but I don't know how to read. I'm illiterate. So I can't. She could even say the creed by heart. She could say Our Father, but she didn't know. So then she told me her story. And I said, where do you live? Here, at the chapel. Yeah, at the chapel. Oh, I said, you're the one that cleaned up everything. Yes, she says. Then she told me how she was a widow, she had 2 boys. And, during the war years, one of the boys was stabbed and died. The boys got a little truck, of course they owed it, and they would go to the country, get potatoes and vegetables, and go to the La Hanawara in Athens, central Athens, and sell the vegetables. And the oldest boy was married, and he had a little girl, and the younger one was the one who was killed. And she told me her whole story, and she said that when I kept vigil all night, because back then they had them in the homes. But in the States also, we didn't have the funerals. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
In the home. And they put all the mirrors had to be covered, and all this and that, superstitions and things. No mirror, you could look in any mirror. Anyhow, and she says all night I was crying, but something in my heart was skipping. And I looked at her. She didn't seem to be unbalanced, I says, here she was crying over her boy that was stabbed, and then something was skipping in her heart, dancing in her heart. Then she says, my other son took it so bad that he lost his brother and his partner. He died from a heart attack within a year. And of course, the creditors came, and they took everything. The truck, of course, no one could use it. The furniture, etc. Then her daughter-in-law died, and grandmother was left with a little baby girl, her granddaughter, in the street, because she was living with the boys. So they were all very poor. This is just after the Second World War ended, right there at that time. And so there wasn't anyone to take in grandmother. One family said, grandmother, we'll take the little baby, the girl. She was baby, she was 1, 2-year-old. And, but we can't take you also. We have no room, and we just can't afford. So that's when they thought, the women in the neighborhood of Botanico, neighborhood, to put Yaya at the chapel of St. Nicholas. They said, Yaya, we'll take you there, you can be the caretaker of the chapel. We'll buy you a little bunch of candles, and when anyone comes, whatever they need for the candles is your pin money, harsiliki. It's Turkish word, harsiliki. And you will have spending money. And then once a day, we'll send one of the children of the neighborhood to bring you a dish of food. So he says, we'll take turns. And either it's fasolia or faques or whatever it is, will be sent. She says, that's just as long as the little child doesn't die on me because I can't take care of it and I'm so poor. Fine, he says, even if I die, no, you won't die. We take care of you, but we just can't take you in. So she says, I cleaned up. He says, where do you sleep? Here, she said, there was a bench. And she had a cureruta. You know curerutas? Yeah. They're rag rugs made on the loom from old clothes, They make them strips and then they weave them. And she had one on the bench and one she would cover herself with. That's where she slept. And she said when her second son died and when her daughter-in-law died, the same thing. She mourned for them with miroroi and funeral bridges and all that. But then she says she had something skipping in her heart. I felt very sad when I heard all her stories. I says, yeah, you don't remember. I says, things pass. I says, that's gone. And they went to our Savior. I says, you should just say a prayer. I'll teach you a little prayer since you don't know letters. I was going to tell about the Jesus prayer. And when I told her, I'll tell you a little prayer and you learn it. Laskale, she says, I pray all the time. Oh, you pray all the time? Yes, now we're talking, but I'm praying. Really? Yeah, we're talking, but in my heart, praying. When I sleep, my heart is praying. What are you saying? Kyrie eleison. Not even the whole Jesus prayer. The 2 words, Lord have mercy, the 2 main words. And Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy. Kyrie eleison. Oh, I says, I was going to teach her. And she had unceasing prayer. This is 1957. 58. The great Yaya that I met after I went in 56. I had met Father Hieronymus yet. I met Father Hieronymus in 1960. I never put 2 and 2 together. She was from Egina. That she may have known Father Hieronymus. So only years after, in the 70s, that I met this Yaya Maria, who was in Egina at the Fan Romani Shrine, Mother of God. She had the keys. And she was very compunctious. And I asked her, did you know Yaya Caterina? Oh, we all knew her. I was a little girl when she was already a young woman. She married. But she lost her husband. She lost everyone knew everything about the islanders, And so you knew her, yes. And she told me, of course, that she knew Father Hieronymus, this Yaya Maria. I said, did Yaya Caterina? Oh, yes. Of course, we all knew Father Hieronymus. Yaya Maria was the one that told me that when they were young, they would plead with their parents to go to vigils where the elder was at these mountain chapels or country chapels. And the parents said, no, you can't be out when it's dark. Let us go, we'll come early. So they were so simple, their parents. They would turn the clocks, the children, 2 hours before. So it would say 8 o'clock, and it was 10 o'clock. Or 9 o'clock, it was 7 o'clock, And they never caught on, the parents. And quietly, after they went to sleep, they would turn the clock forward again. So that, that's the tricks they played to be able to go. So that's where Yaya got the prayer from Father Hieronymus, both of these Yayas. But I didn't know at the time. And she said to me, you must be Kyria Georgia's nephew. He came, Apotaxena, came from the foreign lands. And you went and became a Kalogeraki. So she knew that much. Because in the neighborhood, they always talked about going on. And she said to me, you did the best thing. She says, you know, Father, she says, I had my 2 boys, I lost my boys, I lost my daughter-in-law, but now I got St. Nicholas as my son. And he's not going to die on me. He's immortal. He takes care of me, and I take care of his little church. And so now he says, I'm fine. I have security. I have St. Nicholas as a son. And amazing people, simple people, but very amazing people. I don't know, as many as can read Greek, see the new issue of Kivatos. Simeon, the simple Simeon. Oh, I cried when I read that. I couldn't believe it. I grew up with people like that. They were from Pontus. It doesn't say he was teenager, 13 years old when he came. Whole family was lost. That was the genocide of Pontus. Either Pontus or Smyrna, but having a name Simeon up to both of them.
Yeah.
They had that name.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. And just unbelievable. I'm going to translate that in English, hope we print it in English. You won't believe how simple people, and in our days. Well, anyhow, I went to the Holy Mountain. My father wrote his father Evgeny. His father Evgeny wrote me a letter. And he said, my boy, he says, you're thinking of coming being a monk. We're all illiterate here almost. We're not educated, and you went to school, you're educated to university, and English also, and Greek, and you're going to bury the talent that you received in your education here in the Holy Mountain. You should become some educator or something else in the world. And it was all the arguments of my father. So I understood that my father had written the father, and he just copied out from my father's letter and was writing, because this was what I was hearing every day. Fortunately, when I was in the university, I was in my teens in the university, I came across the Loeb series, Varlam and Yosef, the original by St. John Damascene, and the English translation, Old English. Efi, Varlam, quoth Varlam, quoth Varlam said. And I was delighted, because it had all the arguments for monasticism and all the answers to those that had objections, they said, remember? But Father Evgenios, having written this letter, put a footnote. And the footnote was a little thing from the Old Testament. My father opened the letter, of course, with steam, and read it. He was very happy that he wrote what he told him to write. Then he sealed it again and gave it to me when I came from school. And in his hurry, he didn't read the footnote, or else he didn't catch on. So that said it all. If God is with you, who can be against you? So that was it. I understood that. So I didn't say it to my father. What did he write? I said, he wrote me like he always writes, etc. So my father wrote to my relatives, be sure he doesn't leave to go to the Holy Mountain. So as soon as I got there, they tried to make me change from black. I said, no, I'm going to wear black. I'm going to be a monastic. But you can't go right off. You have to go first to your father's birthplace, your mother's birthplace. My grandparents had reposed, but I would go to the graves. It says, all right. So I went first to my mother's, and that was Mani. That was the time when they were making the olive oil, November, gathering the olives, etc. And stayed there some weeks. I went to the convent also in Kalamata. Had 2 relatives, an auntie and an uncle, that lived outside the convent. And so that took some time. Then I went to Filiatra, and I stayed with my uncle, my father's brother, Haralabi, and Bobby, and went to the graves there. And when I went to Mani, there were no roads. From Kalamata, I had to take a motorboat at Makaton, and go to Synaxis, and 3 hours up by foot to my mother's village. Of course, there were villages higher, Mount Tegetos even. But from the port of Synaxis, it was 3 hours by foot. And they had no roads, but only Talterimi, like the Holy Mountain, cobblestones. Yeah. Animals could go, but I never wasn't an animal. I was a city boy. I never went on a horse, never went on a donkey. They said, well, no, I walk. But at the squares of the villages, they had running springs and a place you could sit under a plane tree and rest and take a drink and then continue. Well, I was used to walking, as I told you, from Detroit when we went to visit, we went by foot, we didn't go by. And so it was nice, but when I first got there, my grandmother's sister was still living. So she told Georgia, the oldest sister, the second oldest, then I was the oldest, let's go to the cemetery. So they took me to the cemetery. The cemetery had a chapel for St. Nicholas, I used to call it, in my mother's village. The church, it was St. George. And once it was a large village, it had 4 churches. And it came down to 1 church, and then now they only have a priest, have 1 priest for 4 villages. 1 Sunday a month liturgy. And so as soon as we got to the graves, they started, the 2 of them, Miroya. And they started crying, and they said, get up. My grandmother's name was Aphrodite. Get up, Yanni was my grandfather. I was named after my grandfather. My brother was named after our paternal grandfather. Of statues, I was named for my mother's father. Get up and greet your grandson who came from far away from Daxena, from the foreign lands. And the way they were saying it and singing it, the dirige, I started crying myself. Well, after 5 minutes of carrying on, the older one, my grandmother's sister, bumped Georgia, her niece, and said, Georgia, to stop on me. We told them the greetings, he says, let's go, we got work to do. So all the tears went away, all the mourning, all the funeral dirges, but they started me up, I couldn't stop crying. And I said, how could they switch so easily? From morning to, let's go, he said, we got things to do. He says, if we told them the greetings, stop on me. Boy, he says, I was a little taken back. So let's go, we went. So I spent 3 weeks there, 1 week, a month passed, the whole of November, the whole of December, and they wouldn't let me go. And I said, I didn't come to Greece to be going around tourism. I says, so I left by not even saying goodbye. Took the train and went to Thessalonica and to go to the Holy Mountain to fulfill my vow. Later I found out that my father said if you can't convince him not to go, and Mother Philothea had come when I came by boat, Bishop Kyprianos Poulakos, who's a distant relative of Dimantani, and Spartis. And Erisouke Yorus, Spartis, Poulakos. He was in Athens. I met his father, his mother, his sister, and they tried to convince me to go to the theological school in Athens, be a theologian, etc. No, I want to go to. I tried going to theological school. I said no. I said, after argumentations with the bishop and my auntie, he told in my presence, my auntie, Philothea, let's stop. The boy has a calling. Let's not sin. If it's from God that he's called, he says, we're not going to try to convince him now not to. And she got mad at him because he said it in my presence. She told me you should have said it privately. Now you gave me Tharos. Anyhow, I was taken to Egina 2 days after the feast of St. Nectarius. He was not officially declared in the 50s yet, as a saint. And I had another aunt there, Evgenia, my mother's name, a nun at St. Nectarius. And so, but I didn't know about Father Hieronymus. So we went to St. Nectarius. I left. They told my relatives, if you see that everything fails, then find a girl in the neighborhood and pay her to say that he assaulted her and get him married. And they said, we would have done it, but they say that our nephew came from the States. The first thing he did, he went and had an affair, forced a young lady. So he says, we would be so embarrassed. He says, we couldn't live it down after. So he says, that's the only reason we didn't do it. But I says, that's all we needed. Anyhow, I still would have gone through with anything like that. Anyhow, I get to Thessalonica. This is still December old style. But it's the end of December, right? I got to the Holy Mountain on the Feast of St. Stephen. It was a few days after Nativity, old style. It was in January, yeah. And it was dark, it was winter, rains had started, and I went to a hotel in Thessalonica to stay overnight, and the next day to leave early in the morning by bus to go the whole Halkidiki to get to the Holy Mountain, to get by little craft, on the mountain. I had written them at St. Panteleimon that I was coming, no answer. I says, it's very peculiar. I says, why they didn't answer, So anyhow, when I went to Greece in 1956, at that time, a crime had been enacted on the Holy Mountain. One monk murdered another monk over 2 paintbrushes. They were iconographers. Actually, this incident of that person who was killed, the monk, is in the life of St. John the Romanian. Because he had visited the Holy Land, and he liked very much the skit of St. Anne, where St. John the Romanian was with Father Paul the Cypriot. And he wanted to join them. And he said, I have to go back, take care of my cell and my supplies and my tools, etc., and then come back. And Father John told him, it's in the life of St. John, if you go, you won't come back. No, I'll come back, for sure, he says. But he was killed and he didn't come back. So it's in the life of, this is there. So my parents says, where are you going to go? There's a den of thieves. There are murderers there. I said, look, if a doctor does a crime, all doctors should be beheaded, because one doctor, if someone else, that's not rational what you people are saying. I'm going. So I finally got to Roda. That's a little village. Prosper is the next one, but I stayed at Roda. Next day I would leave by. I knew nothing about it. I had to go to the Ministry of Exterior Affairs to get a stamped visa, and because I was a foreign citizen, I didn't do anything. I'd heard Holy Mountain was autonomous. I thought I didn't have to get any papers to go. So I stayed overnight at Roda, and there was one, Zafirullah was her name. She was a widow, and she had an inn. There was a few rooms for pilgrims that would come to Holy Mountain. It was very clean, very nice. And my young man, she says, why are you wearing black? Are you in mourning? The same situation. I says, no, I want to be a monk, she says, a monk. This is 1956, 56. She says, no, young people don't go to the Holy Mountain, Father. Young man, he says, and come all the way from the States, but you speak Greek well? I says, yes, my parents spoke Greek, and I learned Greek. And but she was amazed. And what monastery are you going to? St. Panteleimon. Oh, that's a good monastery, she said to me. They're good fathers, very good fathers, Kenovian. And so I liked that she said that. And I told her that I grew up with, they were refugees of that village from Asia Minor, the catastrophe in 1922, and the massacres. And she was very moved that I grew up with compatriots from Asia Minor. And I knew Turkish, and I knew their foods. And months after, in the Holy Great Fast, I think it was, I get this little package. Ioannis Dokimos, Yeramoni Panteleimon, no stamps. They would give it to the boat, and they would throw it out, when they went to the ports, the monasteries. It was from Zafirullah. And what was it? She take chimen, chimen, where they make the Suzuki, etc., and pasturma. And of course it was fast, and she knew that, of course, monastics don't eat meat anytime. And she had made it to little suzikakia and dried it. So it looked like it was suzuki, but you could cut it in little pieces, and it had a nice fragrance of chimen and kimenon, kumen, and all that, which I grew up with Haji Yegas. I cried. She did such a nice gesture, to send me that. I got to the Holy Mountain finally. Those were unbelievable little crafts. Now they're ferry boats. I've seen photographs. I never was in a good Holy Mountain. They have good communication, good boats. Those were unbelievable. You could get around very easily. anyhow, but it was a big storm rage, and actually, because they have a good port, which is closed in, the little boat got there and they stayed there until the storm was over. It took days because it was safe. It wouldn't be broken up, the boat, and they couldn't continue to go to Daphne or to the other monasteries. And so I got there, and Father David was the first who spoke. We spoke with Greek. He was the economos, bursar of the monastery. He was a Carpathian. He and a few others had come after the collapse of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Officially, they were Uniats. But when they were free, they declared they were Orthodox. They were secretly Orthodox, and they would smuggle priests across from the borders. And if they were caught, they were beaten. The priests were beaten. The faithful were beaten in forests. They used to take. They used to have secret liturgies. Remember that Mother Superior, Paraskeva, was her?
Yeah, Paraskeva.
Paraskeva. I knew about her. She was 100 years old, 100 and something about that. She's amazing. She was beaten also by the Austro-Hungarian authorities.
Chipped all her teeth.
Yes, yes. They were amazing people.
Crushed her.
Years after, I found her book, Galicia Golgotha, the Calvary of Galicia lands, and had about all the persecutions of the Austro-Hungarians, the Roman Catholic authorities. And I took copies. Oh, they were so good. Father David says, I was a little boy when my father was arrested, and I didn't know why, because my father was a good man. He was not a criminal. And my mother took me by my hand and took me once to the prison to see my father, behind the bars he was, to take him some clean underwear and a little food, etc. And only in the book he read what had happened. They had accused that they were spies for the Russians, etc., across the borders. And then they said that they used a steeple of the church for the bells to watch and see the movements of the Austro-Hungarian, said it. Anyhow, so I said to him, my name is John Metropolis, and you're the young man that wrote. I said, yes, but I never got an answer. No, he says, we figured, he says, if you're going to come, you're going to come. And if you're not going to come, he says, why even write? I didn't think that was very nice. Not very encouraging, He says, so many people write, he says, and they're just crackpots, like, he didn't say that. But I understood, So he says, we don't have time, he says, sit down and write. And so you came. I came. Well, I said, I came to be a novice. They found it a little difficult. They were suspicious that I wasn't there for monasticism. They thought maybe I was sent to spy, maybe I was sent to write a book. Because once a young man came to the Holy Mountain and stayed some months. Chukas was his last name, I remember it. He was a sociologist. And he wrote a book, Black Angels of Athos. I had read that. It was printed in the 30s. And I read it, and I found in the library anything on Athos, anything on Holy Land, I would always read, in the library. And he wrote many, many beautiful, but also scandalous things and other things, etc. So they said, he's educated, one. That's one count against me. He's Greek. There's 17 Greek monasteries, one Russian, one Bulgarian, one Serbian, and a Romanian skeet. Why does he choose the Russian monastery? Second. And so they said no. So they decided among themselves they were going to be very reserved and cold, which they were. And I was a little hurt by that.
Didn't you need permission to get on the mountain?
Well, I got there. They said, where's your diamanterium? What diamanterium? You mean, how did you come? I by the boat. And you didn't go to the Ministry of Exterior. What Ministry? I don't know. I'm Greek background. I'm American citizen. Oh, no, you can't stay without these permissions. Because it was very cold, the political governor, politikos dikitis, political governor of the Holy Mountain, that represented the Greek government in the Holy Mountain, whose office in domicile is in Karies, the capital, had come to St. Panteleimon's monastery. St. Panteleimon's had quarters for princes, for aristocrats, and they had stoves, wood stoves, that were in the wall. and they would light them from the hall. And once the wall got warm, you had a radiating heat from the whole wall where the stove was in, you see, to in the room, and it was kept very well. And nice facilities, laboratories, etc. for high class. And he would come and spend the winter months there. Free meals and free... and they said, you have to go see the political governor. Konstantopoulos. So I went and saw him. He was famous. He knew German well. He was educated in Germany. He was semi-pious, but very Greek, and for Greek rights, in the Holy Mount, against non-Greeks, etc. So I presented myself, and he says, "Oh no," he says, "you should have." I didn't know. I says, "I heard the Holy Mount. Yes, it's autonomous, but it's part of the Greek state, and therefore we have the laws and the government." Well, I says, "There's a raging storm now. I can't even leave to go back to Salon. I got to go find the office." Well, all right, he says, "It's good that I'm here," he says, because the monastery didn't want to take responsibility. And they said that you harbored someone who was without permission. So he said, "I'll send you to Caries with a note." And of course, he had authority to see what can be done and to get the permission by telexing the Ministry of Exterior Affairs, etc., etc. So I was there 1-2 days, and off I went by foot to go to the Caries. How far is it? Oh, around the mountain, in 20 minutes, you'll be at Xeropotamo, then you turn and go up from Xeropotamo. And after an hour and a half, I hadn't reached Xeropotamo. And I says, "I must be lost. 20 minutes, half an hour. What's going on?" Anyhow, I got to Caries. So I got to Caries. Where did I stay the night? I stayed at Kutlumus, that's the closest monastery, right off Caries. And it was old style, the 1st of January. Vasidiou, Pirtomitu Kyriomos, the name given in the circumcision. They had a nice vigil, and that's my first chanted vigil I heard in the Holy Mountain. And they had good chanters. They had a eunuch who was a very sweet and melodious chanter. He was old, his hair was white, and cotton-like, not a tricha on his face. He was eunuch. And they had a pot-belly stove to heat the church inside. It was very cold in Caries. And I had a heavy army coat, which I dyed black. It was, hot khaki, brown. And at least I was protected by the coat, And after the liturgy, after the vigil of the liturgy, they went to the Arkondariki, and everyone went to get a blessing. First they had treats, and it was raki. I didn't drink, so I didn't drink my raki. They all looked at me as if I was from Mars or something, not drinking the raki, And then you went and kissed the hand of the abbot, and the elders of the monastery were around him, and he would give you a big orange, and a homespun handkerchief, napkin, big napkin. And that's precious, especially the fruit, in winter. So, how Greeks are. I wasn't pushy, and so everyone went before me. I was the last one. In Athens, I tried to get on a bus, never got on a bus. One bus, 2 buses, 3 buses, and the people say, "Listen, you have to push." I said, "I can't push." I said, "That's not polite." "Oh," I said, "you'll never get on if you don't push." He says, they pushed me aside, they all got on. I was left out. That was fun. So when I got to the abbot, he gave all the oranges and the napkins. So he looked at me. He could, from the clothes and from the shoes, they knew that I wasn't Greek. When I first met Papa Dimitriou, he said, "Are you from Alexandria?" I says, "No." And then he told me it's from your shoes and the cut of your suit. He never imagined mistakes. So he reached over and took the orange of one of the fathers, the elders of the municipality, and reached over the other side and took one of the napkins to give it. And I got so impressed. "No," I said, "I can't take it." There's a father. No. I said, "You're going to take it." "I won't." "Listen," he says, "this is our house. We're all taken care of. You're a visitor. And a visitor is Christ. How do we know if you're not Christ? You're going to take it." So I took my orange, and I stayed overnight. Next day I went to the office and into the gendarmes. And they started joking, and it wasn't very nice jokes. And young man, no one comes out of the Holy Mountain. Why did you come? You must be funny. You must. Anyhow, I didn't understand. And I finally I had to pay something for stamps for 3 months permission. Every 3 months I had to renew my permission to remain in the Holy Mountain since I was not a Greek citizen. So I finally got back to I wanted to be back for the Feast of St. Seraphim, the 2nd of January. So I left and snow had started. They said to me, "Where are you going now in the mountain?" Oh, and it covered everything. It says you might miss a step and you go over a cliff. It's the Feast of St. Seraphim. They didn't know anything about St. Seraphim, the Greek monasteries at that time. Went back. My feet froze by the time I got back. Hours. I never got to the church. Such pains, like burning sensation from freezing. They put me with my feet to the wall. They would light the stove from outside. This would radiate heat. And still it hurt unbelievable. So I didn't get to the liturgy for that long Orthodox, in the night, but at least I was back in simple little monastery. And it took a month and a half before the ice broke, that the fathers accepted me, that they understood I was genuine. They were surprised that I knew lives of Russian saints. I found in university a treasure of Russian spirituality by Fedotov, remember? Had the life of Antonio Theodosius Kievo-Pecheres, St. Sirius Aragones, St. Nilo Sora, and the last chapter was from My Life in Christ, Father John of Kronstadt. And they were surprised, non-Russian from the States, that I knew lives of Russian saints and about St. Sarah, about this, about... So...
Did you have a beard here with that?
Did
you have a beard?
No, I was growing. I was shaving until I got there. But then I had a fuzz, then it started growing well. And what happens is that once we made a bond, I was more son than even if I was Russian. And when the others heard, the delegations came, even from the Zealots in the skeets, thinking that they could entice me to join them. They were saying in the Holy Mountain, when elders come from another keli or an abbot from another monastery, hide your novices and your cats. Because they're out to steal them. And it's true.
The cats?
Yeah, it's true. First time the abbot of St. Paul's Monastery came, who was Father Seraphim, and he had never visited St. Panteleimon. He was on his way back, and he stopped and stayed overnight. And during the service and then the liturgy, they put him in the abbot's, because the abbot was very sick, Justin. So he stood in the abbot's stall, and he said the Pistevon, the liturgy, etc. And then he spoke to me, and he said, "Come and visit us." A group of zealots came, and they had a few young ones from Kapsukalibi, I don't know where from, Kapsada. And they thought if they had the young ones, maybe I would be enticed also being young, They were all old people. I was 21. After me, the youngest was 58 years old. Between 21 and 58, there was no one in the monastery. Most of them were in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. Anyhow, so I showed them around. I showed them the churches, especially, I guess, kept all gold, and everything. And when they saw the order, they'd never been in the monastery because monasteries were commemorators. So the zealots, they went out, the young ones. They were impressed. They told me secretly, "You came to a good place. Stay." But their elders didn't hear. Then the abbot of Grigoriou came, Vissarion. Father Theopotos came from Dionysio. Dionysiatis,
Yes.
who wrote Between Heaven and Earth. Yeah. And he said to me, "How can you eat their food?" "Why?" I says, "Food is food." "Oh," he says, "even the ascetics, when they come from the skeets, they bring their own bread. They can't eat this bread here because Russia was used to sourdough. Greeks can't imagine bread being sour.
Yeah,
I mean, it's something that turns their stomach. Actually, they didn't use yeast. They used a certain herb, a grass, wild, to ferment. And it made it quite sour. It was nice bread, they made big karvelia, like the Russian Gospels. They had a saw, one hand, and that's how they cut the slices. Well, these things were big. And they gave you a slice at the meal. And the evening meal, you had to save from your noon meal, one slice a day. It was stricken open. And so, anyhow, I says, Father, monastics, the main thing is not food. Oh, yes, you're right. He says, I'm not saying that, but, food is food, and we're not used to borscht, things like that. They put magic, things like that. Well, I stayed, and we bonded, and then Mr. Konstantopoulos was very happy. He says, this is the beginning to take over the Russian monastery. Oh. Because if you can stay, and then we'll bring another 2 or 3 Greek boys, and they'll know that one young person's there, another one comes, and little by little we'll push them out or dine out. Like they took over Linsky Skiti, they took over Sarai, Sinandra. Now even if the Russians want to come back, there's synodias there. So I didn't like that. He told me openly. And I says, I didn't come to the Holy Mountain to take part in philitism and science about, being Greek, being Russian. I came to be a monk. And he couldn't understand why I didn't like the idea. So anyhow, I became a hero for the Russian fathers and became blacklist for the Greeks, the civil authorities. Then I heard beautiful stories of fathers that were in the monastery, Panteleimon, which has not been written of the monastery. It was amazing stories. They had reached 1,000 monks under Macarius, which was the end of the 1800s. St. John of Kronstadt, in one of his writings, mentions this. He says, St. Seraphim of Saros said that to an abbot once, acquire the Holy Spirit, the peace of God in you, and 1,000 will be saved around you. Mm-hmm. And I've heard, says St. John of Kronstadt, that in our days, there's 1,000 monks at St. Pantelaimon's monastery, with a marvelous abbot called Macarius, etc. So that what St. Seraphim said in the beginning of is fulfilled, he says. 1,000. And they had some amazing ascetics. And it would take time to say many stories, but I should record a few before I repose, etc. Father Ilian liked me very much. He was the acting abbot. He was the first Pneumatikos duhovnik of the monastery, since the abbot was very sick and bedridden. He had swollen legs from veins, standing. And but he was a Spartan. Justin was in Justinos, in pain. As if it wasn't his own body. Father Seraphim was a deacon at that time. He was a Carpathian also. He asked me if I could help him when we changed the bandages. They would just wrap, because it was running. Mm-hmm. Father, when I saw his leg, I couldn't believe he was human. It was wider than my waist. It had so swelled. They took knives and cut slashes. It broke the skin and was open, running wounds. And he would change them, and I would wash them, and then wrap them. Nothing very sanitary. What can you do? That was the Holy Mountain. So anyhow, Father Ilian, he was the librarian also, and I was the only young one. So I became his assistant because the volumes were heavy, and if he wanted to show or take them, he would have me take it down from the shop, put it up back in the shop. I was the only young one, so I was employed at the cemetery to open graves, to bury. The first time I opened a grave, I didn't know that someone was there. They'd taken off the cross. So I was taken off, and the other father was on top. When I hit the bones, I says, and I must have changed color, and Nichevo, he says, come out. He gave me his hand, took me out. He went down. He had a little garden, scadistiri, what they call it, rake. And he raked up the bones. Oh my dear, I said, he didn't tell me someone was there. Well, then I got used to it. So now we do the same here, and I'm the one that usually, now it's Father Sikhus and others. So I went to the garden to bring the tomatoes, to bring the this. The truth about the matter is that their kitchen and foods were not very light, they were heavy. We never ate a fresh cucumber. And we had nice cucumbers from the garden. The garden was a waste. It was one grandfather, Pondius, not a monk, Alexius. He was the gardener, and he was a good gardener. And I would bring sacks on my shoulders, and they would put them in a barrel and take some pails of seawater, Mediterranean seawater, it's very salty, pour it in, put it in the sun, and when they became all bloated, the cucumbers, then they soured, etc. Then they would put them on the table. And you went to cut it, and they squirted the other father across the table, I'm telling you. Why couldn't we eat a fresh cucumber? But that was their cooking, And we never asked what was in the borscht. Who knows what they got in from him. Father Parthenius, he was the cook. And he used to be a boatman, because they had a boat, the monastery, when they were high. They would go to Odessa and bring supplies and produce back and forth. And he worked on the boat, and then he was the... and when we had to cook for, we had to go to clean the potatoes or clean onions, pangueño, like in every monastery. And 5-10 fathers gather, to prepare, and then the cook would cook them, etc. So Father Ilian, when it was a Sunday or a feast day and no work, he would sit on a balcony looking at the sea outside of the Synodicon of the monastery, and I would sit on a stool next to him, and he would tell me he knew a little Greek. And I had taken Russian in university, and I knew a little Russian. And he would tell me the stories of fathers that lived in the monastery. And I was awed. And when I was in Detroit, there were 4 Cypriot brothers, and all of them had families, and their children were my age, and we had a big Cypriot community. And when they heard I was going to go to the Holy Mountain, they said, we have a brother in the Holy Mountain. Please go and see our brother and tell him that you know us and you know all his nephews and nieces, and that we always think of him. They were from a very poor family, agricultural family, farmers in Cyprus, and that's why they left for the States to better themselves. And at the end of the Second World War, they started out towards Port Huron motels. That's when the motels first started. And the wives would wash all the linen, etc. And they were very united, the 4 brothers, and they became quite wealthy, all of them, by having these motels and service them themselves, etc. They didn't have to hire anyone. So I was supposed to go give greetings to their brother. Then, in the old calendar church, one father came called Ephraim. And he was fresh from Greece, and he was always praising his elder. I have an old elder who's a God-bearer. I have an old elder who's a spirit of God and has the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And I was on and on. And he was quite pious, I must say, this Father Ephraim. Karagiannis was his last name, Karas. And they always differentiate with other Ephraims. There's the Americanos. Father Ephraim, the Americanos, the American. And so he told me, you'll go to the Holy Mountain, go see my elder and give greetings. Who's your elder? His name is Father Joseph the Cave Dweller. That's the first time I heard the name Father Joseph the Cave Dweller. And the Cypriots, their brother was named Joseph. He was under Father Joseph the Cave Dweller. So there was 2 people in the same keli, same synodia, that I was supposed to give greetings. But when I came to the Holy Mountain, I spent stays in Panteleimon. Once you become an abbot, you didn't go anywhere. You can step outside the monastery. After you were tonsured, they would give you a blessing. So after I was tonsured, I went to Mother of God, Pordeiza. I went to Vatopedi for the zoni of the Mother of God to venerate, etc. I went to Capsucalivia to meet Father Eugenius. On their feast, Peter and Paul, the Keli was Agi Apostoli. And then on the way back from the feast of the Peter and Paul, I had a blessing for so many days, and I had to be by such and such date, by sunset, back to the monastery. So I, was serious to be back, not to be disobedient. And on the way back, I left by foot from Capsucalivia. I was there for the feast. They had very nice traditions. After the liturgy, they would sit on trapeza. And because it was a skit, they didn't read Lives of Saints. But they would start chanting. And each father would chant an Apolitikion, or a favorite hymn. And they would go around, and everyone was... And if you like this, one father was across of you, and his name was George, it was chant Saint George Politico, and he would return the compliment to chant your saints Politico. It was a nice tradition, etc. And nice fathers at the Capsule Caribbean, like Gutski. It's at the tip of the Holy Mountain, very ascetic one. And I left by foot, and I got lost, and I got to a cave, and there was an old father there, and the cave was had a chapel in honor of St. Anthony, the Great. Unbelievable, little icons. It was the farther part, the deeper part of the cave was the chapel. They must have been from before the fall, the icons. So beautiful. I remember it. He was a kind father. He gave me a treat and then put me on the path. Then I got to Kirasia, high up. I took over. And I stayed at the Russian Academy of St. George. The Russian Academy of St. George, when the Russians took it, they enlarged, it became like a small monastery. Could take 60 monks at cells. Only 3 left. The abbot, Mitrofinus, a deacon, Matthäus, which is the Carpathians, and an old monk, Trifon. So they put me up, since I was from St. Panteleimon Monastery. They were very happy. I said, all night I heard Father Trifon, Господи Иисусе Христе, Сine Божий, Господи Иисусе. I would wake up, he was, Господи Иисусе Христе, Сine Божий, Помилуй, Господи. Did he sleep? I don't know. And in the end, they all came to St. Panteleimon. They couldn't take care of one another. And they sold it to zealots, Greek zealots, the Kelion. So I stayed there. And then from there, I left and went to Karulia because I wanted to see Father Nikon. I heard about him. He knew English well, I heard. I could speak to him in English. He's the one who wrote the foreword to the early fathers of Philokalia. And just as monk of the Holy Mountain, he didn't put his name. And he had been a friend of Palmer. Palmer met him at the end of the Second World War and went to the Holy Mountain, and he met Father Nikon, was delighted that he spoke English, etc. Actually, he baptized him. Father Nikon baptized Palmer. And then he took him and they went to the Holy Land together. Anyhow, so I got to the outside of Karulia, and there was one Father Christostomos. He was a monk and he had a tornaras. And so I stayed there. I was very tired, walking over the whole top, not the top. And so I said, to be sure you get me up at night when you have your kulutia, one man, tia kulutia. They do it all by prayer, but I didn't know the conditions outside the monastery. I was so tired, I slept like a rock. The sun came out and I was still sleeping, and when it became warm, then I woke up as Father. You didn't wake me up. You were very tired, he says. I let you sleep. But I didn't hear the wood. Who was he going to hit the wood for? I was so simple. He says, well, I didn't want to wake you up, he says. I didn't hear chanting. I was quiet. I said it quietly. He says, I don't see that you're going to make it to get into Karulia. Why? It's very difficult. And you come from a city. You're a city boy. You're not a mountain boy. And even for mountain people, it's difficult. Who shows up? But Father, I commemorate them all by Father Cabanas wrote a little pamphlet on him. A father from Karulia. And Cabanas met him also, because Cabanas got and saw Father Nikon. And he had come out from Karulia, and he was barefooted. And he said to Father, why do you discourage the young boy? It's a big blessing, Mother of God, he says, to come to Karulia, he says. And no, boy, he says, you come with me, I'll be your guide, I'll take you to Karulia. I had always a fear of heights. I didn't know what I was getting into. He says, take off your shoes. Take off my shoes. Why? Because you can grab to the rocks, this is better, he says, with your toes, he says, without your shoes. So I took off my shoes, he tied the strings, put them on his shoulder. Now, you look at me. Where I step, you step. Where I put my hands, you put your hands. So after a little while going down, there was a chain with big spikes that did embedded into the face of the rock. It was a sheer cliff, and if you didn't hold on to the chain to put your weight against you would, and he told me don't look down, because you would see the waves hitting the rocks, and then you would, panic. The fathers have fallen to death. It's happened. And so I got terrified, but then I was embarrassed to say, I can't do it, let's go back. How to go back? It's more difficult to go up than to come down. So 3/4 of the way down, there's a big cave. And we stumbled into the cave. I thought I was going to come out of that cave again. I says, I can't. Oh, now he says, only a little ways more, and we're right in there. If it wasn't for that Father Frank, I would have been. And every once in a while, I says, treasures, emeralds, rubies. I would look, I didn't see emeralds, I didn't see rubies. I thought maybe there were emeralds in the rocks. Maybe there were rubies. All the rocks he called treasures. He was so spirit-filled. He had such grace. He saw the whole holy mountain shining like a precious stones and precious metal. And so finally got in, and I went to Father Nikon. Father Nikon had one cell, a little chapel for 3-4 people to get in, and a kitchen. That's it. And a German pilgrim was there already, who had come to St. Panteleimon, and I had met him. And so he had him sleep in the kitchen on the floor. He told me, you're a monk, you stay in the chapel, standing at one of the stalls. So I passed the night standing at the stalls. Then I spoke with him. He knew English very well with an English accent. He was very educated in Russian. He was an aristocracy. And I was very edified by Father Nikon. Then the father took me in. He wanted me to show me his little drawing. It wasn't even a cave. It was a split in the rock. Just a split in the rock. You couldn't walk in. You had to crawl in. So it was a shaft, and the rock had split, and I guess the crack went further up, but it was very low, so and that's where he lived. When Cavarnes got there, he had told Cavarnes told me himself, I'll take care of you. Because again, Father, and where am I going to sleep? In there. In there? How do I get in there? You crawl in, he says. Don't you worry, it's warm in there in the night. It's cold outside, he says, but it's warm in the cave. And I'll sleep out in front so that no wild animal comes, no chacal, no coyote, Cavarnes for wild animals. Oh, don't worry, he says, I'll protect you, he says. If he bites, you bite me first, he says, and then I'll scare him off, he says. Anyhow, so, and then no bread, they would have paksimadi, right, sukari, swayback. But of course, it was molded. So they soak it, and then you try to throw off the mold, They would eat the mold. It was natural penicillin, you know what I mean? But Cavarnes was very, very, we had him here for a while, very hygienic. And the poor man, how he got through that night, then he wasn't hungry, he didn't want to eat anything. When he saw the paksimati like that, etc. And finally he got out. And the father said, that's why you're so thin, he says. You don't eat anything, he says. Cavarnes was always light, very small and thin. And he said, you have to eat a little, he says, to have strength. Anyhow, I says, I can't go up. So he showed me another way, and we climbed. Now at least it was, you could put your foot on, and there wasn't a chain, but you could catch onto other rocks and get higher, till you got over the ledge up top, and then you went away. I continued to go to New Skeet, but I had to come through Little St. Anne, Kadunaika, Little St. Anne, then St. Anne's. But I says, I won't be in time before sunset. And then where am I going to find these Josephs, these two Father Josephs? So I said, I'm going to take a shortcut to go by the Kalterim, the old Kalterim, instead of going through the skeet and down, which was a longer way. But that wasn't very intelligent. But and who should I meet before the skeet? A wayfarer, a pilgrim from Athens. He said, "Young father," he says, "can you tell me where Synaxis? You're on the road. You're on the path. You take me." "No, I can't take you because I have to go down," I says, "to New Skeet, and I want to be there before it's dusk, and so it will be too long." I says, "What kind of monk you are? You're not even a Christian. The Savior says in the Gospel, if someone tells you to go 1 mile, you should go 2 miles with him. You're not willing to take me even to Synaxis." He quotes me the scriptures. All right, I'll take you. So I took him. I took the Kyriako, left him there. I said, "Now I'm running. Bye. A year after, I'm in ammonia. This man comes up to me. "You're the monk I met," he says, "on the road." He recognized me. "Oh, yes, I remember," I says. "I was dead tired," I says, and you told me, and you won't even go 1 mile, let alone 2 miles. Yeah. I'm telling you how it happens. So anyhow, I got torn because there were briars. They hadn't, it wasn't used, that path, And but I stumbled and I got there. Already it was dusk, and I found 3, 4 fathers with a lantern, 2 lanterns. They were repairing the Kalterimi, the cobbled paths. And I said, "Do you know of Father Joseph, the cave dweller? What do you want him?" I got a message. I said, "I have to see him." One of the fathers says, "Wait, about a quarter of an hour, we're finishing, and then I'll take you." So they finished, I waited. He took one of the lanterns, one of the lenses, he took me. He was Joseph the Cypriot. And our Synodia had bought the house of the Holy and mercenaries in New Skeet, and he lived there, with Father Theophylactus, who was the protector of Father Joachim Spezieris. And when they bought the house, they bought it with him. He was living in the house. So he became part of the Synodia of the Elder Joseph. He was very pious about the Theophylactus. And then he told me, "I'm Joseph the Cypriot." "Oh, I know. You know my brother. You know my brothers." I says, "Yes, I came from the same city." "Oh," he says. So he had a tomato and a cucumber, and he had a little bread to eat, and now you rest. But listen, tomorrow by evening I have to be back to the monastery, and this is now a ways, and I can't tarry. No, early in the morning I'll take you down to the piers, and you get on the Sigironia, I'll take you to Daphne, and from Daphne I ran. And it's by the sea, the footpath, and I went to the monastery. So you'll make it. I don't want to be disobedient. This is my first time out of the monastery. You're going to get there. When am I going to see the elder? Later. Well, in the night. Well, now you're tired, and he's resting. I didn't know the typical. So I went to sleep. Slept like a log. 2 or 3 in the morning, he woke me up. I didn't know where I was. We're going to go see the elder. Oh, yeah, I came to see the elder Joseph. Americanos. So he takes the lantern, and we're going. And we leave the skeet. I said, "Father, where are we going?" He said, "We're going to the elder." "But we're leaving the skeet." "Well, he doesn't live in the skeet. He lives outside." We passed that big tower, that Byzantine tower. Underneath there's Prodromos, where Papa Haralabos had his skeet. And the thing was swinging, the lantern. So it made shadows. The rocks of the shrubbery, grotesque. I never feared at night as a boy. I still don't have fear. But for some reason, it was a demon. Being confused in the night, being woken like I was, very tired, and seeing all these shadows, I said, "What is going on? Why now in the middle of the night, out of the skeet? Where are we going? Maybe he's not a good person." I remember my brother said, this and that. It was demonic. Finally, the path going to the monastery of St. Paul's, there was a little fence of cactus Francosiques, and a little gate, and he knew how to open it from inside of a little trick, and he opened the gate, we got in. He lowered his lantern, put it out. We entered a little dwelling, passed one room, second room, and came out to a little porch that looked down to the sea. It was a moonless night. Passing the passageway to get out to the porch, I understood someone was on my right, but I couldn't see. It was dark. It was Father Arsenius, the second to the elder, standing with his prayer robe. They had finished the liturgy at Papaharalapos. They had no chapel then. And the elder from noon till after the liturgy, 2, 3 in the morning, wouldn't speak. So he would be quiet for that vigil by prayer robe all night, up to the time of the liturgy. That's why he couldn't take me in the evening or the sunset, And so he says, the elder. But of course, the elder was sitting, Anatolian style, with his feet under, and with his back to the wall. He was always very sickly, and he was resting. Father Arsenius always standing. And so I see darkness. But there was a cover for the porch too, so there was no moon. But even if there was a little, you couldn't see anything under that darkness. So says the elder, and I went forward. I found a hand. I kissed the hand, and I sat, Anatolian style, opposite. And I see an amazing thing. I see a light, but the light was not like the regular. It didn't have a center.
It's what?
It didn't have a center.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't have a, when
Like
you look
a
at a
glow,
bulb or...
like a glow.
Eh?
A glow.
Yeah, it was like an alabaster.
Yeah.
And if you have a light in the alabaster, it is diffused. So it's an even light all around, without having where the center of it is. It's just... The Byzantines, they didn't have glass. In the church, they had sheets of alabaster for the windows. And there was a diffused light when it came in the daytime. Anyhow, so then I see now the outline of a person glowing. But as I sat, I didn't cry out because it appeared natural. It wasn't natural, of course. I never saw that in my life. But it was so quiet, such stillness came into me, such peace, from all that agitation before thoughts and where am I going in the night, where is we taking? And I would stumble and hit my feet on the rocks. And all of a sudden, I was a big gulf, deep sea of stillness. So I just sat there, looking. Father Joseph scrambled the younger one and found a little bamboo stool they make from Kalamakia. They make stools, so I could sit in a stool. And he said, get up, sit on the stool. No, that's the first time I spoke. I'm fine. And Father Joseph said, you sit, Father Joseph. He's fine. So I got a little encouraged, and I said, Father, I bring you greetings. From where? From America. Oh, from faraway America. From Papa Ephraim. Oh, our alismonitos Papa Ephraim. Our unforgettable, ever memorable Papa Ephraim. He wrote me a letter. He was in Texas then. And he said, it's so hot here, Father, he says, that you can fry an egg on a rock. The rocks get so hot in the sun, you can break an egg and fry it on the rock. And I wrote him, and I said, what are you doing there? It's now here, good. We're no longer at the cave of St. John the Baptist, where we had no water, where we had no guard, where we had nothing. Now we're in New Skeet, and we have guard, we have water, and we have vegetables, and we have younger fathers, and they take care of us. Come and retire with us here, with Father Arsenius and myself, etc. And he says, so you came from America. I was born there. And how is it that you left America and came to us, to Hadaka, the little poor ones? We don't know letters, we're not educated. And you came from a place where people are educated, people. I want to become a monk. You want to become a monk? Yes, from very young, I want to become a monk. How did you want to become a monk? From where did you get the idea of being a monk? There are no monks here in America. There was no monks. I had a Hajiya, and she told me the lives of the ascetics of the Desert Fathers. And from a little boy, I loved the ascetics. I want to be a monk. Why you call her Hajiya? Because she was a pilgrim. Yes, I know. But it's Turkish. Yes, she was Karamali. She didn't speak Greek. She prayed in Turkish. Yes, she prayed in Turkish. Everything's Turkish. What was your grandmother's name? Makrina Prashinitaya. Name of St. Basil's sister, Anatolia's Cappadocia. Tell me, did your grandmother cry? Cry. I said, oh. Did she cry? I would sit 5, 6, 8 years old next to her, quietly, since we couldn't speak. And they don't speak many words, the Anatolians. The words that come out like Father Hieronymus. It's like carved in rock, apophthegmata, sayings. They think what they're going to say, and they say. They communicate with their eyes more than with words. You can enter a room of Anatolians and look around, and you greet them with your eyes, and they greet you with their eyes, and you know what's going on just by... Take icons, and take a sheet of paper and cover the nose down, and look at just the eyes. Save your mother, anything you want, any saint. You'll be surprised what you'll see, just looking at the eyes. When they write letters, the Anatolians will write, from my eyes to your eyes, I greet you. I said, I would be sitting next to her. I'll turn around, 2 fountains. 2 fountains. And I says, I didn't understand, and I thought maybe she remembered the massacres and how they became refugees, uprooted from their homelands, and came to Greece, etc. Tell me, did your grandmother know Tatlisum? Oh, you know Turkish? No, I don't know Turkish, but I know Tatlisum Efendi. Oh, you know Tatlisum Efendi. Yeah. Most sweet Jesus, Master. Tatli, Isum Efendi. You hear Father Arsenius. Clear his throat, Father Arsenius. He had a grandmother, Anatolia, Cappadocia, and she had tears. And she knew Tatlisum Efendi. You don't have to tell me anything else, said the elder. Now I know how you become a monk and why you become a monk. These people, without language, without words, are able, from their heart to another person's heart, to implant piety and love of Christ. I didn't know that Father Arsenius was Pondian, and that when the elder used to go out in the 20s and the 30s, he ministered to a lot of these Asia Minor refugees, Cappadocians and Pontians. And they loved them so much, they followed and they started a convent. The first mother was Epraxia of Thessaloniki. And that was outside of Drama. They had the convent. And he would take Father Arsenius always with him. They were never separated. They were symphonite. A prayer had been read by a priest over them that they would never separate a day or night. So where one was, the other had to be. Father Arsenius didn't like to go out of him, but since the Father Joseph went, he went. So he would use Father Arsenius to interpret, because most of them didn't speak Greek. They were Karamanides. So Father Joseph would speak very compunctionally, and Father Arsenius would say it in Turkish, and they would communicate. I was still in that awe of the light and that unbelievable stillness and peace that entered me, that unbelievable quiet, joy, sweetness. I didn't think I had a body. I didn't think I was breathing the air here. I think it was light breeze of Elias on Mount Horeb. And then the light breeze says, I am the presence of God. I don't remember anything else. He said a few things, and you must be going, you must be tired. Boy, I kissed his hand. I never saw his face. I just saw this light like an alabaster thing glowing. So I couldn't describe the characteristic or anything. I just sent that. By the time Father Joseph was taking me to leave from that entrance, from the porch, come back, boy, he says. I want you to promise me something. What? Promise. If I can do it, I promise. I was so enthused, I was so overcome by the presence of the elder. Come back. I got something to tell you, but I can't tell you now. Promise me you'll come back, and I'll tell you when you come back. Father, I'd love to come back, but I'm under obedience. And if the fathers give me a blessing, I'll come. If they don't, Russians are pious, he told me. The Russian fathers are pious. If you tell them that an elder told you, they'll give you a blessing. Oh, I'll come back, I promise you. If I get the blessing, I'll come back. Bye. Leaving. All the way coming, Father Joseph, with his lantern swinging, was telling me about the elder, like Father Ephraim in the States. That the elders got married, the elder this, the elder that. Going back now, he says, well, what did you understand? What did you feel? What did you experience? Isn't the elder? I had a lump in my throat. I couldn't speak. So he would nudge me. I said, yeah, I says, I've never seen a person like that. Although we didn't really talk, spiritual things, right? But I says it was just an unbelievable presence, such a peace. Yes, as I told you, says the elder is very. And you know, I was looking to find Istihaste because I had read about it before I left the States. But when I ever asked in the Holy Mountain, are there any people that practice the Jesus praise? Oh, no. That's an error past. There are no such people. Don't ask things like that. You're going to go in delusion. You're going to go in preless. You're going to plan. And here I went into the very dwellings of these Istihaste, and I didn't dawn like that Father Constantine, the Chrysostolos, the Tornara, all night by prayer rope, he said his service. And in the morning I said, but I didn't hear you chant. I didn't hear the service. I said it quietly so you would wake up because you were so tired, boy. They didn't wear any little identification. I'm a Istihaste. So I stared them in the face, and it dawned on me after. And wow, I went back. Finally, I got back, and I ran, and I got back before sunset. So on a day when we had Argia, I sat by Father Ilian, a little stool by his feet, and I told him, because he wanted me to tell him what I saw, where I went. And I told him that I went to New Skeet and I took greetings. This father, no, he says, you didn't see him. I saw him. You did not see him. Well, it was dark, so I didn't really see him. But I spoke with him, and I told him, no. Are you sure? Yes. He says, these people are Istihaste, and they're strict as Istihaste. They don't receive visitors. Well, I had greetings, I says, from America, from a spiritual son of his, and from the brothers of the other father was under him. Oh, he says, that is a big gift of the Mother of God, Father Jan said to me, that you will receive by these people. Consider it a big blessing, a gift from the Mother of God. Oh, I said, Istihaste. And I was looking to find people like that. And then I said to him, you know, he told me to promise him that I'd go back again. But I have to ask. Well, he says, if such people says ask, yes, I'll give you a blessing. So, this is the beginning of July. Towards the end of July, St. Mary Magdalene. At the monastery of Simonopotra, they have the right hand of St. Mary Magdalene, or the left hand, one of the hands. And it's still warm. As a living hand, it's incorrupt. And I knew about the relics of the Holy Mother from books. So I asked to go for the feast of St. Mary Magdalene Simonopotra to kiss the relic. And then, of course, New Ski was a little further. 2 monasteries more, and then, you know, 3 monasteries. We go Hugh, Unisiu, St. Paul's. So I went to the vigil and kissed the hand of St. Mary Magdalene. All night, didn't sleep, and left right away after to be sure that I could go to New Ski and come back. And I went down to the seashore that Simonopolis built up high. When I went to the Holy Mountain, my parents were from Peloponnesus. And some people told me, oh, you're from Peloponnesus, you should go to Estigmeno. They're all Peloponnesians. If you're from the 7 islands, Zakynthos, Kerkyra, Falonia, then you went to St. Paul's, the Tanisi. If you're Asia Minor, you went to Simonopetra, the Nikrasiates. So they had, you went to Grigoria, if you were to this part of Greece, they had still their regional patriotismus, etc. And I said, no, I made a vow to go to Panteleimon, I come to Panteleimon. So with the encouragement of Father and the blessing of the monastery, I went down to the sea, and they had a rowboat from Dionysiou Monastery. And I said, where are you from, Father? We came for the vigil, now we're going back. I want to go to New Ski. Will you take me? Come in. So again, you know how to row? I don't know how to row. I'm a city boy. I come from America, I never rowed. Oh, he says, a young man like you, although I was skinny, you could help us row. I didn't know how to row. So they rowed, the fathers, who were much older than me. We got to Dionysiou. I didn't go into the monastery. I ran. And the footpath of Dionysiou going to St. Paul's, which is the next monastery, is so close to the water that sometimes the water comes in, and I got my feet wet. With splashes of the waves from the sea. But I didn't care. And I didn't go to St. Paul's either. I ran to New Ski. So this time, I was able to see the elder, because in the morning, till noon, he received the synodiac, not the visitors, to hear their thoughts, etc., etc. And then noon, he would stop talking, he would have a little siesta, rest of the Lord, he would get up, he would have his cup of coffee, he always had to look up to help him for his vigil, and then he would start the vigil with Pirop at dusk, when the sun was going down, till 1 in the morning when they started the liturgy. After they had frequent, I didn't know they had frequent, I didn't know anything about the typical. So this time now he was there, I could see him, and he spoke. He opened his mouth. I never saw or heard a person like the elder. Like a river came out, flowing. No pause, no, where did it come from? I was just, I don't know if my jaw fell. I was just looking at him and saying, and it was like he wrote me before he reposed, a little ponimataki I will write to my son Panteleimon, Pandelaki, a little ponimataki. What's ponimataki?
Poem.
Ponima.
Little poem.
Eh?
Little poem.
Not poma, poma, a little pamphlet, a little instruction, ponima. And and he said how God created the world and put the sun to be the leader in the day, and the moon, the stars, to lead the night, like a great polyhelios, all lit, and so beautiful. Nothing revelation, but the way he said it, the words he would use, and it just was awesome. And then in the end, he says he created man like a spectator called to a theater to behold all creation and to rejoice. And I just couldn't believe my ears. I just couldn't believe that. And it was a presence. Like when he was in the chapel, it was always very small chapels. Every service has a presence. There's the icons, there's the services, there's the hymns. There's grace, a special liturgy, the presence of our Savior in the liturgy, in the Holy Communion, the Eucharist. But there was another STT parousia, conscious, you could experience, very, very conscious presence. The whole chapel would be filled. He was so God-bearing that you understood that God was present in him and filled the presence. First time I found a person from the expression in the life of St. Anthony. There was a group of monks, and St. Anthony was among them. And a monk came that was a foreigner. He would go straight to Father Anthony, to Abba Antonius, without being introduced, without anyone pointing out, this is Abba Antonius. There was something about his presence that differentiated him from all the rest of the fathers, St. Anthony the Great. So with the elder Joseph. There was something a sweetness, a compunction, a God-bearingness about that it just drew you, and you just were like basking in the sun. You love to be in the presence. Like one father would come over from Syria every year, and that's unbelievable, to Egypt to visit St. Anthony in the inner desert. And he never spoke. And after a few years coming once a year, St. Anthony became curious, who wasn't curious. Father says, you've been coming for a series of, you never open your mouth. You don't ask anything. I don't have anything to ask. Why do you come? It suffices me to behold your glory, he says. That's from the Psalms. It suffices me to behold your glory, the uncreated glory of God. Just to see you, he says, I come. And that's enough reward for me to come all the way from Syria by foot and go back. Half the year walking one way, half the year walking the other way. Just to see St. Anthony. The elder was like that. It was unbelievable. Nature was changed. He never brushed his teeth. No hygiene whatsoever. Never washed, nothing. Barefooted. If you went close to his mouth, a fragrance came out. No breath that was that had a bad acid. No stench. I'm not having it washed or not washing. Just a real fragrance. One time at St. Anne's, there was a Zealot Kilion. There were many Zealots in the streets. Papa Ananias. And they were iconographers. They always made the icons for the elder. And they loved the elder. There were not many monks that respected the elder of the Holy Mountain. They all thought he was Panteleimon. Like they thought concerning St. Max was Kapsukarivitis. And when St. Gregory Sinai visited and found Maximus, he wanted to speak with him. He says, you came to find me? He says, didn't they tell you that I'm deluded? That I'm in delusion? And he says, well, speak me of your delusion, Father. And when St. Maximus opened his mouth and told him marvelous things, St. Gregory Sinaitis sighed. Father, he says, how I wish I would have your delusion. And be in delusion like you, he says. I never heard such things. Anyhow, so this Father Ananias said, Father Joseph, why don't you come once with Father Arsenius, that's before they had Synodia, and we'll have a vigil according to your typicon. We'll just say by prayer rope at the whole vigil. So it was cold, they closed the windows of the chapel, and they sat, the Synodia, and Father Arsenius standing with the elder, and they would say prayer ropes. Prayer, prayer, prayer. And they go around, each one saying prayer, prayer, prayer. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Oh, naga. After a few hours of the Jesus prayer, such a fragrance came forth from the elder, they had to open the windows, they told me, because they got drunk from the fragrance. They got dizzy. That's the elder. Nature was changed. Nicate physios taxis in the elder. He would say, Father, water runs up. Water never runs up, water runs down. You never gainsay the elder. I was told this by one of the fathers. They beheld water running up. And that was done by God so that they would understand. The elder speaks, God speaks. You don't ever gainsay. What are you talking about, Father? The laws of gravity, water can't go up. It always comes down. It was unbelievable, marvelous situations. So this is living things. Then I heard stories like this one that we just put in the faithful story, about that one father who left and then got married and had a little boy. Did you see it?
I haven't seen it. I haven't read it yet.
And then only last year, from a religious periodical from Cyprus, I learned that this father was at Grigoriou Monastery, and I knew him. He was the guest master of the monastery. And 2 times that I went, I saw him. But when they told me the story, I thought it was 1-2 generations before our time, the beginning of last century. And not that part of the Holy Mount, the other part. This, I guess, to conceal the person since he was still living. And there were marvelous things that could be said for just last century and the 1800s. they haven't written. Father Gabriel, the abbot of Dionisio, wrote a Panteleimon, and he has quite a few marvelous stories in there. But the Panteleimon of the Russian monastery, they don't know Russian, so they don't know anything about those fathers. Unbelievable, but real. Therefore, I told this person that asked me about monasticism. I says, when I graduated from school, the teachers were very enthused because it was very good. I majored in history and medieval history, and my parents didn't understand. That was the history of the church. Medieval history starts with St. Constantine the Great and goes to the High Middle Ages when the Renaissance started. And so I was very good. I wrote some good papers. And they wanted me to continue. I have to get a master's, doctorate. And they said to me, this is the middle 50s, early 50s. They just started visiting studies in the United States. The center was done at Barton Oaks in Washington, D.C., which is Harvard University. You know that?
Yes.
And they said to me, look, you got all A's in your history classes. You know the main language of the Byzantine Empire, Greek. It's a cinch. You're going to become a great scholar in Byzantine studies if you take up Byzantine studies. No, I wanted to be a monk from a child. I'm going to be a monk. What are you talking about? They want me to get this little gold key. You know, little gold key? Fita Kappa something, I don't know.
Phi Beta. Yeah, Phi Beta.
That's if you excel in studies, you get this gold key. So I told the poor man, Dr. Burks of the history department, I said, really? And what am I going to do with the key? It'll open doors, he says. You have a key like that. In intellectual centers, you know, it means you're not oi polloi, you know, you're one of the elite, you know. Will it open the kingdom? What kingdom? Paradise. Are you serious? Are you joking? I'm dead serious. Oh my God, he says. You're still living in the Middle Ages, he says. You talk like a person who's out of the Middle Ages, he says. You excel so well, he says, but no wonder you excelled in history of the Middle Ages, he says. This is crazy, he says. I say, I have no need of it. If it doesn't open the kingdom, it's useless. Forget about it. But then because they were pressing me so much, I said to myself, look, I'm going to go. If I don't find what I'm looking for, like I didn't find when I came to the seminary, I'm young. I stay 1-2 years. I'll have experience. I'll be a novice. I'll come back. Since I gained so many years because I got out of high school early, I got out of this early, that early, I'm still young, in my 20s, early 20s. I can go back to school and get my... Well, I says, I told this person to the Holy Mountain, beyond my fondest imagination I found things. Beyond my fondest imagination. I've never one time had a thought or regretted that I could have become something. I didn't want to become anything else. I didn't want to become a deacon. I didn't want to become a priest. I want to be a monk. And they enticed me at the Patriarchate to stay and be educated at Halki. The Patriarch said, I'll pay the tuition. And the bishops came and congratulated me of the throne. And they said, a big honor. The Patriarch is going to pay your tuition. He must love your father very much and your family. Of course, he was my godfather. And you stay here 10, 15 years, you'll be needed and be one with us, bone from bone, flesh from flesh. And when you go back to the States, you'll go as a big man back to the States. Because you'll be trusted, you'll be one of us, you know. I found no spirituality to the Patriarchate. I said, I'm not staying here. I don't want to go to theological school. I don't want to be a clergyman. I want to be a monk. But I found fathers, not only Father Joseph, Father was the top, but even in St. Panteleimon and other places, unbelievable fathers. That Father Leon was an angelic man. The senior fathers, Father Arsenius, Father Ephraim, Father Haram, they met Father Leon. When we went in 63, we went and he was still living. He was the abbot in 63. And it said about St. Gregory, the theologian. He had a sister, Gorgonia, and she had reached such a spiritual state, they didn't call her Gorgonia, the brothers. They called her Orgonian, which is neutral. She wasn't female, she was angelic. I would say the same thing about Father Mariano. he was angelic. And it was nothing about him that was, but his mannerisms, his presence, his serving was ethereal, angelic. He was just a very, very special rare man. And there were other fathers, it's amazing. This father Ησύχιος. Όνομα και πράγμα. Name and Ησύχιος, real Ησύχιος. The ecclesiarch of Saint, I guess, Skepi, the big Russian church in town. Oh, and I heard stories. The whole holy mountain, not one time has a relic come out incorrupt. All over the Orthodox world, incorrupt relics have come out. 2 in the United States, St. John Maximovich and Metropolitan Filaret. And we haven't opened other graves. Tikhon of San Francisco, he, I believe, would be incorrupt if they ever opened the grave. He was a very marvelous man. He retired, and Archbishop John became Archbishop of San Francisco. This Tikhon before. I met him in Jordan. That's where he reposed and is buried. And and the Holy Mountain, not one time has the holy relics come out incorrupt. And they always say that, the fathers. They say, Kievo Pechers, hundreds in the caves. Other parts of the Orthodox world. In my lifetime, Mother Irene, Father John the Romanian, how many times I've seen incorrupt relics? I was present when we opened the graves. And they say, that's from the Mother of God. So that there would not be detracted from her presence on the Holy Mountain. Because if they had incorrupt fathers on the Holy Mountain, they would become, renowned, and so not to have a detraction of the veneration of the Mother of God, she is the queen and abbess of the whole Holy Mountain, etc. But there is a story, a real story, which probably is not too distant, maybe the end of last 2 centuries before, the 1800s or begin 1900s, in the parts of Krasnokarivia, outside the desert part, because there's a few hours walk from there to Lavra, the monastery. And that area was where St. Maximus Kavsouvitis was. They never found the relics of St. Maximus Kavsouvitis. And you pass a certain area going to Lavra, before Prodromica, the Romanian city, and a fragrance comes out, even in winter, where there's no herbs, no wildflowers, no nothing. And they think in that area must be the grave of St. Maximus of Kavsouvitis. They even burned the thamnus, the brush, to see if there's an opening, a cave. They've moved rocks, boulders, they haven't found. Well, in that area lived an ascetic. And after there a few years, he wanted to start a small garden. And he thought, I will remove some of the stones and try to bring some earth and just an herb garden. And have a little lettuce and a little, So he cleared off a little area. And he found a grave underneath the stones that were on top. And so he cleared off the whole thing. And there was a slab. He pried it open. Incorrupt relic. Whole. Beard, everything. From what century? Didn't know. Name? No inscription. Didn't know. When he lived, who he was, what was his name? This was now evening. He had sweated. Oh my dear, an incorrupt relic. Incorrupt relic. So he thought, I'll stay all night by the grave, say prayers. As soon as it dawns, I'll go run to Lavra and tell them to come, pick up the relics, take them to Lavra, and maybe they could find out who he was. Who knows if that was St. Maximus, the Kavsouvitis? We don't know. He was saying his prayers all night, and before it dawned, he fell asleep a little. So tired. And he sees the relic getting up. The father resurrected. And he said to him, with an austere countenance, Father, did we struggle here together? No, he says. Did we keep fast and vigils together? No. So how are you going to betray me now and go tell the fathers? You cover me up just like I was. In that day of the common resurrection, I'll come out. Not now. And if you don't, and keep secret what you just saw and found, you will not see the face of God. He was so terrified by that, he woke up and he said, oh my dear, oh my dear. So he put the slab back, he put the stones back, and he didn't say anything till his deathbed. But he, at the deathbed, he couldn't get up. And they said, where? Somewhere outside, somewhere. They went looking after him. Didn't find it. Can you imagine what is hidden? Not only in other places, treasures. But God does not wish them to be revealed. And this father, he allowed that he would come to know that there was such a thing, but then told them, you cover me up as I was, and I wait the day of the resurrection to come out. I don't want any reverence now, etc. There was Theophilus, the myrflower, and they made a false grave because he told the fathers he was out in the desert to them, when I die, put a rope around my feet, drag me out, throw me in the forest so that the animals can eat me. Don't bury me, I'm not worthy of burial. And of course they didn't do that. But because they were afraid that he was of such fame, that they would come and open the grave to take his bones, steal them, they made a false grave and they buried him secretly somewhere. Still don't know where he's buried. He was myrflower, Theophilus, the myrflower of the Holy Mountain. He was the time of the false union right after the fall of Constantinople, the Saint Theophilus. There are appearance of fathers, there were appearance of two fathers barefooted, naked, like Saint Onufrius, like Saint Peter Vathos. Many sights, not seen of it, sightings. But whenever they tried to approach them, they disappeared. So they always spoke, even when about the naked ones, the two naked ones that were barefooted and they were well. And one time, the elder Joseph came down from the top of the mountain with Father Arsenius. It was winter, it had snowed, and it was very cold, so they went to the center of St. Anne's, skied. They were kind, all the skis were kind to the Zealot fathers, because they sympathized. Many Zealots were in the area, in the skis, and non-commemorating Kirya. And they knew that they would find warmth in the Aphrodite. They would be given some dry bread and a little water and warm up a little. So then they were about a quarter of an hour in the Archondarik, and they started hitting gongs, talanda, simandra. What happened? The whole skeet came out, all the fathers, they were running here and there. What happened? The naked ones. Where? We saw the footprints in the snow, because no one had stepped out in the night, and this was morning, and there were the two sets of footprints. Oh, the naked. Father Joseph jumps out, Father Arsenius jumps out, they all start running to follow the footsteps to find the naked ones. Then Father Joseph looked down, he sees Father Arsenius were barefooted. Those are our footprints when we came in the night before it dawned. Let's back out before they look down and see our feet and say, and they start greeting us.
Yeah.
That they all came out to find the naked ones, and it was our footprints.
Yeah.
But there are. But in the area where Mitrophanes, philosophers and the other, the two fathers, in Kadunakia, they have a chapel built, and they appear, but they didn't find the graves, they didn't find, and Mikragianis, he did, Gerasimus a Koruthia for the two fathers of Kadunakia, and Theophilus, and I forget the other name. So there are many amazing stories. The abbot of Costamonitu was Simioforos at the time. I was in the Holy Mountain in the 50s. But I never got to Costamonitu, so I never met the man. They said that he had gifts of the Holy Spirit. Everyone spoke about it. and also the abbot of Efsigmeno, before Euthemius, the one who stopped the commemoration, I met him in 1960 when we went to the pilgrimage with Father Poulos. Very sweet man, and he had gifts of the Holy Spirit. So there were people in my days in the Holy Mountain that were marvelous, etc. Not just Father Joseph, etc. After Holy Land, because I went to Constantinople hoping as soon as I got off the Holy Mountain that the Patriarch would receive the Greek government, that I could stay without changing my citizenship. And I want to change my citizenship. The monastery says, no, don't do it, Father, because this is the Balkans and things change, and we had very sad years with the occupation, and after the occupation with the Civil War, they arrested fathers from our monastery. They put him in jail. His collaborators with the German was all false. And you have a very strong passport. The United States passport is the strongest in the world today. And I wouldn't do that. And but I was getting nervous. I wanted to stay in. So on Pascha Day, the admiral of the Fifth Fleet of the United States ships Armada in the Mediterranean, he visited with his two teenager boys, and the American consul accompanied him from Thessaloniki. And because I knew English, I came to sing with him. I was their guide to show them the churches and the treasures of the monastery, and we went to the bell tower, and I was the one that rang the big bell, because I was the only one that was young that could start swinging it. They rang the 3 9-ton bells, and this was a 15-ton bell, and you could put maybe 5 cows under it. It was like a cave. And you had to be inside. If you were outside, it would break your eardrums, the boom. And you couldn't hit it right away. You had to start swinging, and a little more, and it would take momentum, and then boom, 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 boom. So I rang the bell. The two boys, they were terrified, and they ran, and they almost fell to their death, because there was a little curved stairwell to get from the top of the refectory roof to the bell tower where the bells were. And anyhow, so I asked them, the council, about my citizenship. And he says, if you change your citizenship, you're no longer an American. But I'm born in the States. Doesn't make any difference. You're of age, and if you do it willingly, then to come back to the States, you have to get someone to sponsor you. A father, a mother, a brother, and get a visa. As a foreigner, you're finished. You're not an American citizen. So I left and went to Constantinople, and they said, no, the Patriarch says we can't involve. But what do you want to be a monk? He says, the time of monasm is past, stay here and go to Halkia, pay your tuition. Then you become a clergyman, you'll be here at the Patriarch. We need people with American passports because the Turks were very angry, and it's difficult. And I said, no. So I left and I went to Jerusalem after staying some months to recuperate in Kalamata at my auntie's convent outside. And I did find Father John. And if he had encouraged me, I would have stayed. Because I love the desert. That was my first love. But he didn't. It was 1958. And the great fast that I met him in the caves. And he reposed 2 years later, 1960. So I guess he understood that he would not be around. So why encourage me to stay? And even Father Paul, the Cypriot who was there, he left after Father John. He stayed 1 more year, he couldn't take. He left. And so when I went back to the Holy Mountain, then I went to the elder and I stayed a while, some weeks, but I was visitor. I had my diamonitirio and all that, I had to go to the Ministry of Exterior Affairs and all that. I didn't go illegally. And the elder said, we had the feast of St. John the Russian. And when he heard that I knew people from the village, Hajia was from the village where the saint came from. Then he said, oh, what a beautiful saint. He knew about him also from the Graciates, the refugees that were from Cappadocia and from Father Arsenius. And so he said, tomorrow, he says, it's a feast. Would you like to take communion? Oh, I would love to take communion, but I can't. Why? Because we ate, Father. What did we eat? Half a head of garlic, a piece of bread, and a piece of cheese. That was the meal, 1 time a day. in the afternoon, 9th hour. And, oh yeah, he said, yes, we had a little cheese. So I said, I can't take communion. When I went to St. Panteleimon Monastery, they took communion once a week, on Saturday, never on Sunday, because you had to have oil on Saturday and no oil the day before. Friday was a fast day, no oil, then you could take communion. And the great fast, St. Panteleimon was exceptional, 2 times a week. Wednesday, on a pre-sanctified, and Saturday, the regular worship. Most places 1, and not even 1. 40 days would have to pass before you took another Holy Communion. So 5 minutes later, it would be nice if you took communion. Father, I'd love to take communion, but what would the fathers have to scandalize the fathers? Why? Because I says we ate a little piece of cheese. The fathers won't be scandalized if you're not scandalized. I won't be scandalized. When I was in the world, Father, I would take communion every Sunday. And I told him I had to go around to different parishes and even non-Greek parishes because they wouldn't give me communion every Sunday in the same parish, you know. And I didn't know they were Colibades. I didn't know they took communion every day. I didn't know they're typical. And he says, no, Father, this is wrong. There's a recent tradition of that you can't take communion if you had oil the day before. If you keep the fast, you can take communion every day. I couldn't believe my ears that on the Holy Mountain I was hearing people having such a tradition. So the elder was a godsend in so many different ways. When I came back, we had our typical, which is Colibades typical, right? Continual Holy Communion. If anyone told me, even from the Holy Mount, where'd you find? I said, oh, I didn't invent it. It's not an American invention. I received it from my father, an elder. And he was Panteleimon, the Joseph, yeah, I know. And Father Maximus at Aios Vasilios and a few others, they're Colibades. So there are a few fathers, but very few, you can count on your fingers. There are not even 10 on the Holy Mountain that have frequent Holy Communion. And when our fathers took over Dionysius Monastery and Philotheo Monastery, they couldn't have communion every day. Because now they were in official monasteries and that's unheard of. So they had frequent communion, but not every day. Father Harabos would have they'd take one day and partake another, so there always were someone taking communion. Because the elders would say it was an insult to our Savior and to the liturgy to celebrate it and no one take communion. Why celebrate the liturgy? For the priest? Just for the priest to take communion. Metaphor to the priest was, with fear, faith, and love of God, draw nigh, no one draws nigh. You set the table, and no one sits at the table to partake. Well, that's an insult to the host, to our Savior, who sets the table and sets himself as food for us. And so, in order to have every liturgy, some taken, some will take, but not every day. But in the skeets, we had the typical, no one knew, well, no one could tell us in our own Kelia what we were doing. So, in many different ways, we were benefacted by the prayers of the elder Joseph Arsenio says. Forgive me, because if we're all tired and now we have another full day. This is a humorous.
Yeah.
They had a canyon on Kapsokalivia, St. John the Theologian. There was a center of the Zealots. They had many monks and then 50, 60 Zealots from other get it for the feast. So it was a big feast. And there was one father who was from Asia Minor. He didn't know how to chant, but he wanted to chant. So they had the kanonark went back and forth, you know. He would read the verse and then they would chant it. That's the Holy Mountain. And some people don't understand this. I remember the mother of John Rigas and Mother Magdalene, I would be kanonarki and she would chant without looking at the book, you know. And she said, Sonny, see, she can't read. He has to tell her the verse. See, I know how to read. This is his older son. Anyhow, so let me chant this. They said, so finally, they were going to play at Yoga. All right, you can chant. Panikos, it was supposed to be Panikos, they said. So they started, instead of having a hymn, they started from the Epistle of St. John the 3 readings, and the wrong readings, the Epistle of St. John the Apostle. So he was going on and on and on, and he didn't know any hymns. He was just making up, you know, different. So he got exhausted, and he said, doesn't this have a great mercy? Because most hymns end ketomegaelos, you know, it ends that way. So he says, doesn't this hymn have a great mercy? He says, the end. This canyon, they had a big kratir out of one block of crystal, natural crystal, not glass, which was rare. It was expensive. And antique. Who gifted it? Who knows from what palatial home, you know, outside. And they would have it in the middle of the table, and they would fill it with wine, and they would. And one day, when they had the feast, they had a dissension. And the fathers were talking, and they said, who is greater? John the Baptist or John the Theologian? Of course, the Killian and the feast was John the Theologian. They said John the Theologian was his beloved disciple, bosom friend of Christ at the mystical supper. But our Savior said, no man greater is born of John the Baptist, so John the Baptist. No, John the Theologian, he gave his mother, you know, to... so they went on and on, back and forth. And it became a little heated. And then they hear crack, and that crystal broke in their eyes without anyone touching it. It didn't fall on it, broke. One of the elders who had mine, bring a scale right away. They weighed exact, both sides. Fathers, it says, we lost our kratir, it says, but they put it together with a silver ring after we glued it. Someone stole it. I read it in the newspaper 5 years, 10 years ago, someone stole it. And the fathers became fewer and fewer. But that's a true happening. And they said, among the saints, we're not going to have who's higher, who's lower. Equal. Yeah.